With 2025 already upon us means a new year of Star Citizen, which means more ships. But first, let's recap on what ships came out last year. These are all the ships that I predicted would come out last year in last year's video. These are all the ships that actually came out. I did get a few wrong. I probably was too optimistic about the Apollo because I was looking at the Spirit and seeing how fast it went from concept to release and thought maybe they might do that with the Apollo. But nope, turns out they didn't do it. There's the Anvil Legionnaire, which even in my video I was skeptical it was coming out last year. But I was mostly going by the silhouette shown in CitizenCon, and it looked exactly like the Legionnaire. So I'm not gonna take the L on that one. And then there was the E1 Spirit, which I only predicted it because it's a variant and I thought it would be easier to make. But then again, passenger-oriented ships don't seem to have much of a purpose in the game right now. So I don't really care that it didn't come out. But now let's look forward to this year. What new ships will we see in 2025? Well, 2025 has already hit the ground running. We already saw the release of 3 new ships so far, which I haven't seen ships released this early in a while. Maybe it's happened before, I don't know. But at this rate, we're getting 1 new ship per month. First is the Mystic Fortune. Released at the start of the Lunar New Year event, this is essentially the salvage version of the Prospector. In fact, it can be argued it's technically a variant of the Prospector because it's visually similar and it shares the same weapons and components specs as the Prospector, save for the salvaging head of course. But I think it's different enough that it can be its own unique ship. It has 12 SUs of external cargo capacity, which lets you use the ship as a mini hull A, unlike the Prospector with its ore pods. And then there's additional space at the back with an elevator that allows additional access and storage of various things. The second ship, which is definitely a variant, is the Anvil Super Hornet Mark II. This was released at the beginning of the Valentine's Day event. The differences between this variant and other Hornet Mark IIs are more firepower, and it's the only 2-seater variant in its class. Then we got a brand new mining ship in the Drake Golem in Alpha 4.1. Drake's entry to the mining business. Very bare bones compared to the Prospector, and unlike the Prospector, is cockpit only, and you can't swap out the mining head. It has its own proprietary mining pods that are fitted within the body of the ship, so I don't think you can swap them out for different pods. It will be cheaper though, which is probably the only reason to get it over the Prospector. Now that we got the already released ships out of the way, it's time to talk about the ships that have yet to come out. As always, I'm only going to be focusing on ships that are in active development, have been in production beyond concept art but currently aren't, and ships that are planned to be in production this year. So I'm not going to talk about the Kraken or Orion because we're definitely not seeing them this year. I'm also not going to refer to the roadmap as much because they haven't updated the progress tracker in a while, so it's not that useful. Let's start with the ships I already mentioned. Not much has been said about the Apollo since last year's video, but they did show a silhouette of it in last year's CitizenCon, which indicates they plan to release it this year. The fact that there was very little mention of the Apollo last year seems to suggest they weren't really working on it for at least most of 2024. I've checked all the monthly reports in 2024, not one mention of it. But if CIG says it's coming this year, then it's probably coming this year. As for when, I don't know. It depends on how much work was done before they paused production on it. I should also mention that the Apollo has 2 variants, the Medevac and the Triage. I'm assuming the Triage is the one that comes out first because, according to the wiki, the Medevac is the variant with better armor and more missiles. Unlike the Apollo though, they didn't show the Legionnaire in CitizenCon. But again, unlike the Apollo, they did talk about it in their monthly reports. The most recent mention was in the April 2024 report where they said they've completed White Box, but they're exploring ways to make boarding hostile ships more practical with stuff like collapsible covers. Makes sense, if you could just chuck grenades or rockets into the tunnel and kill everyone within it, it wouldn't be very useful. In the March 2024 report, it talks about gameplay validation, which I'm assuming is what led to the boarding tunnel thing, but also mentioned it's not in full production yet because of the lack of available artists to work on it. Then there's the hacking gameplay that's required for boarding. So yeah, I don't believe it's gonna come out this year. It's been 2 years since the Banu merchantman was banished to CIG Purgatory, and nothing has changed since then. If some of you aren't familiar with the merchantman's situation, let me fill you in. In CitizenCon 2023, the devs revealed that the team that worked on that ship left in 2022, so instead of picking up where they left off, they decided to just put it off until some time in the future. How long into the future? Well, that's where there's more bad news, because according to a French interview with John Crew in last year's CitizenCon, they have no plans to release new alien ships in the foreseeable future. Now the question was classified with ship roles other than combat or transport, but given the merchantman's purpose, it could be argued that some of its roles wouldn't fit into either of those categories. But if anything, I think it's going to be a lot longer than 12 to 18 months. So it's a ship I've talked about before and nothing has changed, and this is not merely a way for me to make this video longer so I can add more mid-roll. Alright, now onto the ships that I haven't talked about. Last year I mentioned that CIG was starting to build capital ships one manufacturer at a time. This was done to streamline the development process for capital ships since they share similar assets with each other so they can get them out faster. And the first manufacturer they started with was RSI, with the Polaris, which they released last year. Now the timeline was that they were going to start with the Polaris, then do the Galaxy, then the Perseus. Or so that was the plan at the time, but judging by the ship silhouette from last year's CitizenCon, it looks like the Perseus will see the light of day this year. And you can tell it's the Perseus because it has that massive turret at the front which the Galaxy doesn't have. The Perseus is classified as a heavy gunship, whereas the Polaris is classified as a corvette. Details about this ship are scarce despite its planned release this year. It was revealed over 4 years ago during IAE 2950, and according to the wiki, it's supposed to have 4 size 7 cannons, supported by 2 smaller remote turrets, and carry 20 size 5 torpedoes. Now that sounds impressive, until you consider that the Polaris has 28 size 10 torpedoes in its launch bay. Other details mention that it supports a crew of 1 to 6 people, whereas the Polaris is rated for 6 to 12 people, which piques my interest. A soloable capital ship? Color me intrigued. It also has a surprisingly small cargo capacity of 50 SCU, which is less than a Freelancer, but looking at these deck plans, the only space for cargo would be at the bottom deck, which can also be used to store vehicles, and right next to the cargo bay would be the docking collar. But these are preliminary details that are subject to change as CIG fleshes out the ship as it's being developed. Looking at the deck plans, it has a lot less amenities compared to the Polaris. There's no flight hangar, so you can't park any fighter ships in it. You might be able to fit some snub craft like the Merlin or the Fury inside the cargo bay. There doesn't seem to be a med bay or a brig either, so it doesn't look like you can use the ship as a mobile command center like the Polaris. As for when it comes out, I would assume fall this year like the Polaris. Speaking of which, what is going on with the Galaxy? I mean, it was supposed to precede the Perseus after all. First announced in fall 2022 during IAE, it was dubbed to be a modular capital class ship, and it was announced with 3 modules. It can be fitted with one of either the cargo bay, the med bay, or the refinery module, with more planned to be added in the future, such as a manufacturing module and a base building module, which they announced at CitizenCon 2023 and further confirmed in the 2024 Spectrum post. Now looking at the deck plans and comparing it to the Perseus, I can see why they decided to do the Perseus first instead. The interior of the Perseus looks simpler and has less square footage compared to the Galaxy, and also the fact that the Perseus is not modular. Like the Perseus, it doesn't have a lot of cargo capacity, with only 64 SCU. Although it does have a hangar, and the cargo grid is laid out so that you can transport cargo and park a small ship in there at the same time. Although the cargo module will add 512 SCUs of capacity, bringing it to a similar capacity to the Polaris of 576 SCU. But we won't see the Galaxy until next year at least, so I won't go into too much detail about the ship until next year. Next is the Ironclad, which was revealed at Drake DefenseCon last year during Invictus Launch Week. It's essentially a giant heavily armored flying brick classified as an armored freighter with over 1,500 SCU of cargo capacity. I'm actually surprised this ship is coming out so soon after they announced it, given its size. According to the wiki, it's supposed to have 4 turrets, 2 of which are manned, 1 remote turret, and 1 interior remote turret, which initially I thought was a tractor beam, but the tractor beams have its own category. Judging by how the cargo bay opens, I'm assuming you can also use the Ironclad as a sort of mobile hangar as well. It also will have 3 tractor beams. Judging by this picture, 2 of them are visible, with one of them looking like it's mounted in an integrated rail system so you can move it back and forth while using it if need be. An interesting feature of the Ironclad is its detachable command module. It's located on the back left side of the ship and it can detach and function as its own ship. It's supposed to serve as an escape pod in case shit hits the fan, and what's more interesting is that it's compatible with the Caterpillar. The module has its own fuel tanks, quantum drive, shields, radar, all size 1, so you can use it as a regular ship. It also looks like it has a turret on top so it can defend itself if it needs to, which might be what the interior remote turret is for, to be used by the command ship when it detaches. So it can detach from the Ironclad and either reattach back or fly to a Caterpillar and attach itself there, or just fly and scout around like any normal small ship. There's also a variant of the Ironclad called the Ironclad Assault. It's described as a combined arms platform and has more firepower than the Ironclad. It sacrifices about 400 SUs of cargo capacity for a vehicle garage with a repair bay capable of repairing, rearming, and refueling vehicles and ships along with generating new components for replacement. Its added firepower includes 3 quad turrets and an extra size 3 turret. The devs mentioned that both variants have secure storage for the more dangerous and naughty cargo, which they say is located towards the nose of the ship, and it's supposed to be hard to breach from both inside and out. As for when it comes out, I'd say it's unlikely, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Ironclad releases at DefenseCon during Invictus launch week, a year after they announced it. But it's a big ship and it takes a lot of time to develop it, so if not during ILW, then probably fall. As for the Assault variant, well, it requires repair and fabrication gameplay to be implemented, so probably much further into the future. An interesting note, the devs mentioned that making the Ironclad will make it easier to develop the Kraken, because they can use existing assets to streamline development. So who knows, we might see it soonish? Moving on to the consolidated Outland Pioneer. Now this was a surprise to me because this ship is absolutely massive and judging by the dimensions, might be the biggest ship yet. Classified as a heavy construction ship, it was shown as a silhouette during CitizenCon, which means they are working on it. They did spend almost an hour of the convention talking about base building and manufacturing, so it seems they are very serious about implementing it. This ship was first announced during CitizenCon 2017, so it's been sitting in the backlog for quite a while. Despite its massive size, it has less cargo capacity than the Ironclad, although that's probably subject to change, and its landing gear allows it to stably land on uneven surfaces despite its size. It has 2 remote and manned turrets, and according to the wiki, 6 pilot-controlled distortion cannons, which I don't know how useful that would be, but it's gonna be one heck of a light show. The real magic happens at the front and middle part of the ship. That's where all the manufacturing and fabrication occurs, not just buildings for outposts, but also ships and vehicles as well. Despite being in active development, I doubt this ship will come out this year. They may have planned on implementing base building this year, but this was 2 months before they released 4.0, which turned out to be a massive clusterfuck and pivoting their strategy from releasing more features to focusing more on stability and bug fixing. Imagine Invictus launch week or IE when everyone can rent a Pioneer. That would be chaos. More chaos than when everyone could rent a Polaris when it first came out. So I don't think we're seeing base building and manufacturing this year. They might release the Pioneer without it, but I doubt it. But who knows? It depends on how quickly they fix the elevators. Next we have this unknown ship that looks like someone took the Drake Corsair and cut it in half, like a mini Corsair. Because of that, there's no way to know the specs or the manufacturer of said ship. Unlike the Mirai Guardian last year, there are no leaks I'm aware of that could help with the guess. A lot of people suggested it's a Drake ship because of its design similarities to the Corsair, but some people have also floated that it may be an Anvil or Aegis ship. A lot of people also compared it to the Cutter, which I don't believe is a good comparison. First off, it's a very tall ship. Like, even if you cut the wings off and you only had the chassis of the ship, it's still taller than the Apollo. The Cutter is only 6 meters tall, while the Apollo is 10 meters tall. And also if you look at the person for scale between the two ships, the guy for the mini Corsair is smaller than the Apollo, so the body of the ship is probably more than double the height of the Cutter. The landing gear looks interesting though. It looks like a ship is on a pedestal. My theory is that there's either an elevator or some way to access the ship within the landing gear. CIG always likes to add some interesting gimmicks in their ship design, but that's just a theory. As for when the ship comes out, it could be any time, perhaps as soon as Invictus launch week. It wouldn't be surprising. During CitizenCon, they emphasized that those ships I previously mentioned were some of the ships they were working on and plan to release after CitizenCon. So one of the ships that they didn't show in CitizenCon but could be released this year could be the Anvil Paladin, a heavy gunship akin to the Redeemer. Although probably be ships that haven't been announced or teased yet. According to the progress tracker, there are at least 8 unannounced vehicles in development, spread across both vehicle content teams. There might be more considering that the progress tracker for vehicles seems to not have been updated in a while. Then there are the variants. The 2 Anvil Hornet variants are already out. There's the Starlancer variants, the TAC and the BLD. I think the TAC is more likely to come first before the BLD. I already mentioned the Crusader E1 Spirit, which I doubt is coming this year. I also talked about the Ironclad Assault, but that would require repair gameplay to be fully implemented, or at least more fleshed out, and the Mirai Guardian Kai, which could come this year perhaps? But of course, I gotta give an honorable mention to the 600i. It's not a new ship, but it's supposed to be going through a rework, and a lot of you guys were opining about it in the comments in last year's video. So I decided to find out what's going on and do a little bit of digging. There's a forum thread on Spectrum detailing everything that's going on with the 600i, not just the rework, or lack thereof, but also any balancing updates or adjustments. If you want to check it out, I've linked it in the description. The 600i is supposed to be a modular ship, where you can fit either an exploration module or a touring module, like the 600i variants currently in the game. The exploration module is supposed to have a med bay, more storage, a lift to hold vehicles as large as the Nova tank, a hollow globe station, and a larger armory, just to name a few features. The touring module is more luxurious with a pool, sauna, kitchen, and more guest rooms, each with their own escape pods, to make this ship more of a space yacht. I won't go into too much detail about what the rework is supposed to entail, given that it's been years since the official announcement, and lots of shit is subject to change. I mean, is the captain's quarters really going to remain the same? I mean, I guess that'd be less work for the devs. The last mention I can find about the 600i rework came from a YouTuber named Bored Gamer, who seems to be well connected to the devs at CIG as far as I'm aware. This was from a live stream about a month ago where someone brought up the 600i. He says they were working on it, but doesn't know if they're working on it right now. He likes to think they are, and he hopes to see it later this year, which I wouldn't bet on that. As for something a little more official from the devs, the closest I got was this bar citizen interview in Shenzhen from June last year. I'll let you guys give it a listen.
So we know there are a lot of old ships in our games now, like the Colorless Black, like the old 300 series. Like, is there any plan to update those interiors to up to our current standard?
Yes. So ultimately, we want to have every vehicle in the game done to a gold standard, ideally for 1.0. We are looking basically at many factors that decide which ones get done first. That's sort of how much work is needed, how much time we have. Do they still fit the role that they were originally promised for? So things like the Constellation, Cutlass will definitely get update passes to make them more like the newer ships.
A pretty cookie cutter answer. Yes, we would like all ships to be gold standard before 1.0 release, yada yada yada. The interviewer didn't explicitly mention the 600i, but it is one of the older ships. What was interesting was that John Crew mentioned updating the Constellation and Cutlass ships, and a little later also mentioned updating the Aurora and Mustang ships to gold standard as well. So I'm assuming those ships will get reworked before the 600i does. But that's the closest we got about anything remotely related to the 600i from the devs. And right now I haven't heard anything about a Constellation or Cutlass rework, so unfortunately we're gonna be waiting quite a while for the 600i rework. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe and ring that bell. What ships are you guys looking forward to this year? Let me know in the comments. I'm still curious on what that mini Corsair ship may be, and I'm kinda interested in the Perseus, because it looks like I could use it as a solo player. Although, I also do like the look of the Ironclad. In the meantime, Alpha 4.1 just came out, and if you want to know more about the newest NPC in the game, Wicklow, and what you can do and get from him, then I highly recommend you watch this video right here.